Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us again this evening. Apologies for the late start to the program this evening. We were addressing some technical difficulties. But nonetheless, we will be proceeding with the program. And I am super, super excited about this evening. And that's because over the last 2 weeks, we've been talking about gender based violence. We've looked at it from different perspectives, from a legal perspective. We've had psychiatrists help us to understand it. We've then looked at the role of advocacy groups and how they play a role in making sure that this pandemic is something that comes to the attention of people, and that victims actually have the support that they need to overcome this challenge. This evening, we're doing something slightly different. We're listening to people who have been out there to do some research on this particular area, who are going to help us. They're going to talk about their research, what they've seen in the field, talking to different people, having conducted surveys and things like that. And to help us out on that journey this evening, I have Hope Orivi. And Hope is a journalist and a researcher, and her primary focus is on communication and development. Her present study as a doctoral student centers on water, sanitation, hygiene, and Hope has a very interesting study that she's carrying out, and she's looking into intimate partner homicide. I tell you, as I started to look at the details of that, I was shocked. But I'm not going to let that out of the bag. I'm going to let Hope do her thing. We also have with us this evening. Now, I hope I'm not going to get into trouble for this. I'm going to get that pronunciation absolutely correct. We have Dr. Uwana Akpan. Did I get that right? I'm sure I did, Doc. I'm sure I did. I'm just checking his face out there to see if I got that right. Um, Now, there is an interesting survey that Dr. Akpan has worked on, that I would like us to look at in detail as well tonight. It's an area that is quite interesting, and some of the things that we see in his research also tie in with what we've seen with the other researchers that we have on the team tonight. Um, I will introduce our other guest in a minute, but before we go too far, I would want to welcome our guests this evening. And first of all, Hope, you are welcome to the program this evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Akinyemi, for having me on the program. Good evening, all.
Thank you once again. Apologies for the delay in starting off the program. Before I go to the other guests this evening, Hope, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got into this field of study?
Okay. Like you introduced me, my doctoral work is on communication for development, and it cuts across a lot of issues, particularly social issues. We live in human societies, and we know there are things that are common. People want to talk about some things, people want to look at developmental issues, and as a communicator, we begin to look at those things and see the role that communication plays in the affairs of people. And that was what actually took me to this area. Anything that has to do with issues that affect people in society, social issues, to which this one, gender-based violence, belongs.
So, did you have any sort of personal experience in this area before going into the area?
Okay, no. Will I say personal? Okay, will I call that a personal experience? As in myself, I'm a journalist, and I have had the opportunity of covering crime and society, and this is one of the area that actually surfaces most of the times. You hear of cases of a spouse killing the other, or having very aggressive or violent quarrels, and it's as though it became really, really rampant at a time. That was in 2018. And a colleague and myself just decided to look deeper into causes of this very problem. I think that was where the interest came from.
Wow. All right. Let's start about to look at your topic, uh,
Yeah,
and the research you did. What were the
yeah,
core findings from your research? And intimate partner homicide is
yeah.
such an interesting point for you to want to do some research on. What led you to that? Talk about the recommendations you've seen so far. I know you said the survey is not over, but at least you've
Yeah.
started it. Talk to us about the recommendations of that survey.
Okay, I think at that time in 2018, we found out that just like almost every other day, there were reports in the media of a case of a spouse, particularly the husband killing the wife. And we sat back and looked at it to say, why is this? Yes, the nationality is concerned, Nigerians, but Nigerians in the diaspora, people in America, in different states in the United States of America, people in the UK, Nigerians. And then we started seeing the same thing happen back home here in Nigeria. It was as though it was just coming from all sides, from America, from the UK, here in Nigeria, and we decided to look into it. Yes, for the recommendations, from the perspective of communication, one very strong recommendation is the fact that couples must talk. Couples have failed to talk, to communicate. You just have people uh, being annoyed when they are offended, and some carry that grudge in within them and think of how can I get a pound of flesh back from my spouse who had done this to me, rather than sit down and communicate. Of course, come to an or trash what the issues are and say this is what it is and this is what I don't like. Rather than do that, they fail to communicate this, they fail to talk. So a very strong recommendation is that couples must talk. I mean, it may not necessarily start because they are annoyed at each other. It may not start by talking with each other, but they may have confidence in their relationship, in their marriage. It could be a friend, a very close friend, either to the man or to the woman, or a family member that they should actually go to and say, look, I am really annoyed with my spouse for this reason. And that person definitely, for somebody who plays a very strong role or part in the life of a couple, that kind of friend or that kind of confidant can now call the other partner. This is what I've heard. What is it? And then they can sit down together and discuss and communicate what the issues are. That is a strong one. Then, from a recommendation from a sociologist is that couples, before they even get married, must sit down and agree, look at their expectations. Because according to the sociologist, rather, people come into a marriage having some very, very strong expectations of their partner. And then when not happening as they had thought, then they begin to feel failed, and every little thing will just spark off very aggression or could spark off violence. That intending couples must sit down and talk to other what their expectations are. And right there, they must address it to say, if you are expecting me to do all this, I may not be able to do all this. This is how much I am able to do. And that it helps people progress and stay in their relationship happily or in their marriage happily. But if somebody comes with a very large expectation and they are there and begin to experience something, a shortfall to what they have expected, they won't be happy. They are easily annoyed. They get offended, and they probably will not be in a good frame of mind to take a right decision when it becomes necessary.
So the foundation.
Yes.
Let me ask this, because what you're talking about here is quite interesting. So the foundation yes. of the challenge you have seen is building yes. that communication between the partners, the husband and the wife, before they yes. go into that relationship.
Yes, before they go into that relationship of marriage. And then while they are married, couples have failed to communicate. Couples have failed completely to communicate. One of the partners is annoyed and they just carry it within themselves. Rather than speak, rather than ask the partner, rather than talk to the husband or the husband talk to the wife, they just go and box up in that annoyance. And then it's like a gunpowder waiting to explode. But if they make time, if they agree, I think it is an agreement that must be entered into by partners, that we must learn to talk. We must address issues. We must communicate. You don't go assuming that this is what the other person is feeling, or you don't go assuming that this is what this person has done. Why not speak? Why not ask questions? Why not address issues? Talk to each other. And by way of talking, even the psychologist affirmed to that by way of talking, when you talk, you are relieved of tension. You are able to pour out your mind. And then the misconception of what you may think the other person, the reason for the other person acting in a particular way, would have been trashed, would have been addressed, than being boxed up. Couples must talk. Couples don't talk. They don't communicate. When they talk, they rather talk at each other rather than talk to each other and address their challenges or their problems.
There's something I saw in your report, and I want to push this point a little bit more. You said percentage of representation in cases. In 95% of the cases reviewed, the husbands killed the wives, while 5% were women who killed their husbands. And you're seeing this not just in the context of Nigeria or Africa, but you're also seeing that in other countries. That pattern replay itself in other countries. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Okay, I would like you to get this right. We reviewed 150 cases, and we particularly narrowed in on Nigerians, husband and wife Nigerians. But 95% of those cases are people, Nigerians who live abroad. They're either living in the US, yes, Nigerians, husband Nigeria, wife Nigeria. But they live in the US, they live in the UK. And then for the cases we reviewed in Nigeria, just about 5% of the case no, sorry, 20% of the cases, 75% of the cases, 75% of the cases are Nigerians in the diaspora couples who live abroad, either in the US or in the UK. Then 20% of the cases are couples who live back home here in Nigeria. But 95% of the cases reviewed are cases of husbands who killed their wives.
Wow.
Why only 5%? Yes. Why only 5% were wives who killed their husbands? And then, like the report shows there was a case of a teen spouse. She's a teenager, I think about 13 going to 14, who killed the husband back home here in Nigeria, in northern part of Nigeria. Yes.
Can I check something there, Hope? Because this research you're showing is quite interesting. Yeah. Even though Nigerians are leaving Nigeria and going into the diaspora, that issue is just replicating itself and going with them wherever they go.
Yes. They have failed to communicate. They fail to discuss issues. They fail to address issues concerning them.
So would you say that this is, I know you call it communication, but
yes,
is this something that is embedded in the fabric of Nigerian society, Nigerian culture, such that it doesn't really matter where you are? These traits are replaying themselves.
Okay, I will not completely say so that it is peculiar to Nigerians. It's just that in this study we were interested in looking at only the cases that involved Nigerian couples. Yes, it happens in other nationalities, but we wanted to look down to the cases that involved Nigerians. So it didn't matter where they live, but interestingly, we found that of the 150 cases, 95% of the cases involve Nigerians who live in the US or live in the UK. And then, like what the professor of sociology said, expectations for the husbands, they expect certain kind of regards or respect or approach from the wives. And when they didn't get that, the next thing is aggression to violence and then killing.
Wow.
That was, yes.
Now, let's move on.
Yes.
Sorry, what did you say there?
So we just wanted to narrow down that study to Nigerian couples. And then interestingly, our findings show that of the 150 cases that we reviewed, 70% of the cases are those who live abroad. And then 75% of the cases are Nigerians who live abroad, Nigerian couples who live abroad, and 20% of them are those who live in Nigeria.
Wow. Let me ask this other question here, because looking at your research, even though it's not conclusive yet, as you've highlighted, it says here that women have cited infidelity against their husbands as one of the reasons. Can you talk to us about that?
Okay, yes. Findings from the study, which is still ongoing, the women complained of infidelity. Of all the cases, the women talked about infidelity, while the men complained of disrespect from their wives. And most of the cases from the men, those in the US and those who live in the UK, said their wives became disrespectful to them because they got good jobs, better jobs. They now started making more money, and forgot that Nigerian society or Nigeria has a culture where the wife has to be completely submissive to the husband, where the wife has to submit and respect, treat the husband as a lord, and they couldn't take it.
You know,
For me, yes.
I hear that a lot here, that as soon as the wife starts to make more money than the husband, then it turns into this sort of situation where disrespect, as your study has shown,
Yeah.
comes to the fore. How do we stop that sort of thing?
I think we'll go back again to the issue of discussing expectations, as the sociologist pointed out. What are your expectations? Bring them to the table. Before you go into the marriage, discuss what you expect. And then, knowing very well from that same angle of sociology that we are from a society that has um, expectations of the wife concerning how she should treat her husband in public, how she should treat the husband before his family, how she should treat the husband before his friends, and even her friends. But they begin to see a something different from that culture. So I think much more of the culture, the remembrance of what this culture expects us to do should be in mind. But I know that there are some men who don't overtly carry that on their head or everywhere to say, oh, you said this to me in front of my family members, or you did this to me in front of my friends. They may not, but for men who would always cite culture, who would always make reference to the place of culture in the Nigerian society, then when they discuss, when they talk about it, it may sound strange, but I think it's beginning to make sense to say, bring your expectations to the table. Let's talk about your expectations before we go into this deal. It is important. So if it's a man who is very concerned, who is really concerned about culture, to say, no, if you are before my friends, you don't make certain jokes. If you are before my family members, you don't say certain things to me. I think the woman should understand it that way.
So you
And then
wouldn't,
the issue,
sorry, so you wouldn't see
yeah,
some of these things as unreasonable expectations. It's just more of a communication issue than an unreasonable expectation.
yes, it's more of the problem of lapses in communication. Because
Wow.
if you discuss, yes, it's more of lapses in communication. People don't talk. People don't address issues. Like in a number of the cases, it's the issue of money. Oh, you now make so much more money and you don't come to submit it to me or to let me know, give me a breakdown and say, there, I earn this now. We can have this. I can allow you make decision. We should be making, it's part of the expectations. Part of the expectations. Oh, we should be making these monetary decisions together. We should be making these financial decisions together. If all those have been discussed before entering into that marital agreement, then there wouldn't be problems. There wouldn't be
Wow.
problems at all.
Well,
Yeah, there won't be
you know,
problems.
the findings that you were talking about here are also
Yes.
consistent with some of the other research that we've seen in this area. Um, We're having some technical issues. I don't think we can get Dr. Akpan on, but in his report, it also
Yes.
talks about communication. And there's one thing that he referenced in his report that I want to pass across to you, to
Yeah.
have you respond on this. And they called it in their research, they used the term communication resilience.
Okay.
Communication resilience. And
Yes.
from your perspective, you were talking communication, they were talking communication resilience.
Yes.
Where do you draw the line between um, either party, because it goes both ways? Where do you
Yes.
draw the line between either party bottling up all these things going on that ultimately then end up in a reaction versus let's talk about this in a more civilized manner, because if you are being too resilient, you are bottling up some of these ideas. Where do you draw
Yeah.
the line of communication there?
Okay. I think for some people, yeah, we have also seen cases where one of the partners may say, "Oh, I am not ready to talk now. Can it be later?" And then we see the other partner insisting that you must listen to me now. But again, I would say that if they have had that agreement before marriage to say, even if you are worked up, even if you are feeling low or feeling really bad or whatever, we must both agree to talk at the same time. Or if we see that this thing is getting out of hand, we must both agree to address it, or we must both agree to go and cool off and then come back to discuss. So it must be an agreement from the work before they enter into the marriage deal at all. They
At
must
all?
agree because we have different personalities. We have different people have different resilience to things. There are people who may not mind and say, okay, can we talk about it straight away? But there are some people who will say, I'm not in the mood to talk now. Can we do that later? So both parties must agree. It boils down to communication, the strategy, the timing. If we
Wow.
agree that when I'm worked up, oh, we may not talk, we can just forget about it for a while and come back. Then let it follow the agreement. But then you just find out that couples go into the marriage and then this person is feeling this way, that person is feeling the other way. They cannot come to a consensus. They cannot come to an agreement. Yeah.
You know, there's something you're touching on there that I've always heard of it. I went through it at the stage where I was getting married 20 years ago. But it's this point of marriage counseling that some religious organizations have. I think what you're
Yes.
talking to is really what that whole institution set up in those organizations was trying to address. That if you can address that at the
Yes.
onset, then this issue of intimate partner homicide then becomes something that's been dealt with at the onset. And this is so
Yes.
amazing that the research is now backing that institution that was created at the time.
Yes. It backs it completely.
Wow.
Couples must agree. Couples must agree because we are talking of human beings, not files. You have situations where one person gets so worked up and the other person is calm. You must agree. And I think when people are in a relationship prior to marriage, they must have to an extent understand what what this person is like. in his personality, or what this person is like in her personality traits, at least both parties would have seen what they are able to handle and what they cannot. And before the marriage, they should agree. And it is also important. It becomes their responsibility to stick to whatever agreement they may have made. To say, if we are worked up, please, we can forget about the issue for that time, but come back to address it. It is important. It doesn't matter, if this one can agree or be cool at that time. If there's a problem, the problem must be addressed. The problem must be discussed. Both parties must be seen to say, I am now okay, the extent to which we have discussed this. I am now fine, the extent to which we have discussed. They must agree. That is communication. Communication means talking it, addressing it, and being fine with your final results. To say, I have heard and am satisfied. Oh, I am not satisfied yet until this is done. If they don't get to the point, then they have not communicated. If one party will walk out on the other, then they won't be communicating.
Hope, I think we have Oyindamola on here. Let me see if I can bring her on and get her to respond to what you're saying here. Let me see. I just might be able to do this. Oyindamola, are you there? Oyindamola, can you hear me? If you're there, say something. Oyindamola, can you hear me? Oh, I'm not sure we have her there. Oh no, I don't think we have her there. Bear with me 1 second. Let's just check this. I would really love to hear her. Oyindamola, can you hear us? Can you hear us there, Oyindamola? We would really love to hear your views on this. No, I'm not sure she's hearing us there. No, she's not. Let me ask you this question. Where do you take your research now? What is the next step for your research?
What we actually want to look at, to dig into the weapons used by the killer spouses to do the killing. Because in the course of the study, there was one done in Houston, and almost all the cases that were reviewed, the killer spouses used shotguns. And then in another study carried out in Kenya, that is East Africa, the killer spouses used kitchen knives. So we are going to look at what these killer spouses use in killing their partners, so we can know and do some analysis, speak with psychologists, speak with sociologists, and make a meaning of it. Although in some of those cases,
go ahead.
Yes, in some of those cases, like the ones that happened in the US, we saw some cases of guns. Then we also saw a very peculiar case of the husband tying the wife to the trunk of his car.
Oh, wow.
And drove her down the street or drove her down the road until the woman died.
Oh, wow.
And the man said he needed to do that. He was so aggrieved. He was so he wanted a method that would hurt the woman so badly that even if he knew she was going to die, he wanted to be satisfied the way in which he would kill her. So we are going to
it amazes me listening to you speak here, Hope. It amazes me that communication could have avoided that untimely situation. Just communicating with your spouse, communicating with your loved one could have addressed that. Wow. One last question for you before we bring this to a close. You've talked about looking into how the weapons used to kill the spouses.
Yes.
Are you going to balance that across the US, UK? Which countries are you targeting? Because if you look at the US, guns are more readily available, not so much when you look at the UK. But when you look at Nigeria, I would say guns are now becoming more readily available given some of the security issues that we're seeing in the country. Are you focusing on particular countries to look at, and do you intend to grow your group from 150 beyond that?
Yes, I think it is necessary. It is necessary to look at, to do more reviews, to review more cases. Yes, it is very important, and it's going to cut across. We look at the US, look at least a country or two other countries outside Nigeria in Africa, look at the UK, and then back home in Nigeria. But for Nigeria, a number of the cases have been through or by kitchen knives.
Oh, wow.
Yes, kitchen knives.
How do you legislate against that?
I think the judiciary will have to do a lot here. Yes, the judiciary will have to do a lot. It's crime, but I think we just have to take it for advocate on the kind of ways of addressing such issues, because we have seen cases where after a while family members begin to request and beg, appeal that the cases should be settled out of court and all that. No, these are usually cases of the person, there is a suspect against the state. So the judiciary can begin to look at how people would understand the punishment that they will face. I think if they understand, many times we've seen cases, we've heard cases of family members going back to say, oh, please, can we settle this outside of the purview of the government or outside the law? But if they have a better understanding to say, no, whosoever does this is a crime against the state, they will face it. I think it will make some more meaning. Yes, it will make some more meaning.
Wow. Hope, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. And once again, apologies on the technical issues at the start, because I know you were waiting right up from the beginning. But what you have said this evening has been just transformational. Just listening to that, my perspective on on the impact of communication has now gone up a notch in terms of how I view communication, because it seems to be the common thread across your research and some of the other research papers that I've seen here preparing for this program. So I want to say thank you for your time. We really appreciate that. We've come to the end of the program this evening. And
Thank
any final words, if you had one thing you could say to anyone out there going through a challenge of some sort, uh, what would that message be?
Okay. First, I'll say thank you for having me come to discuss some of these findings. The key message from me as a communicator, and which is I call it the fundamental truth, is that people must learn to communicate. They shouldn't just talk at a person and walk away and assume that they have passed across a message. No, they must communicate. There must be a response from the person you are talking to, particularly when the person is your spouse. You must talk. And if you think that you are not getting a solution, you are not coming to terms, you are not agreeing to something, then you must speak to a third party who may be a friend of the family, friend of both parties, or friend to the man or friend to the woman, or somebody who is highly respected between both of them. People must communicate, people must talk.
Wow. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. And hopefully, we will speak again. Would like to know when you get to the other end of that research, probably bring you
Yeah.
back to see if the findings have changed following the new data
Yes.
that you've got. Thank you for joining us tonight. And to our viewers, thank you for joining us tonight. See you on our next broadcast.